So this will be a technical talk. We are not going to install any kind of libraries in Python. We are not going to implement LLM solutions, but we are going to tell stories and look at nice data visualizations and nice pictures. The first detailed network that we have here actually goes back to 2022. I am not very much a soccer fan. I have been working with a friend and colleague who is very much into soccer. And that year, there was a FIFA World Cup, if I remember correctly. And we decided to build a small predictive algorithm or a prediction model and figure out which teams are the most likely to win. Here, we wanted to compare some very simple statistical properties of the teams, of the national teams. For example, the total value, current value of the players they have, or the total number of years of experience the players in a team have. And we compared these basic statistical descriptors to the network properties of the players. But then again, these are soccer players, athletes. So how can we talk about their network properties? And that's where the first tricky part came. And also a nice illustration on how network science usually works on a daily basis. We had to figure out a way to collect collaboration information about soccer players. We had to figure out which soccer players played together, which supposedly is proportional to how much time they spent together, how likely they were to influence each other, how likely they were to learn from each other. So we went for a website that collects the transfer history of all internationally recognized players. And from that website, we collected the complete transfer history of the players. And then when we compared the transfer histories of the players, we were able to figure out which players, encoded by the nodes of the network, have been working together with which other players, and for how long have they been teammates. So we had the network nodes as the players, and we had the connection between them showing for how long they have been teammates. And once we followed this logic, we were able to build up this network that you can see here. And from this network, actually turned out that the network properties, so how, for example, central a player is in this network or how diverse his connections were, assuming or supposing that they had a lot of chance to acquire experience and learn from many different players with very different playing styles, was actually almost such a great predictor to a team's success as the total value of the players at that moment. So here in this short piece, we were able to figure out that networks are really playing a serious role in how well soccer players and soccer teams can perform. And after soccer, another quick illustration, and I think I will speed up a bit. So in this project, we were working very far from soccer or any sports for that matter. And I was working actually with a group of biologists, mostly vets and ethologists. And they were focusing on the neural anatomic structure of dog brains or canine brains. So they had a very unique experimental setup where they trained dogs to nicely crawl into fMRI machines. You can see the image as well here on the top left. And once the dogs were laying down and calmly just relaxing in the MRI machine, they created functional MRI scans, which created series of images of their brain, showing that when given different external stimuli, how the different parts of their brain got activated and how the different brain regions were firing simultaneously or asynchronously. Then, by the end of these scans, they had loads of data about the different parts of the network, the different parts of the dog brain. And I came into the picture as a network scientist who helped them to turn that huge temporal data set into a very compact summary graph, which you can see on the right. So here the data set was essentially loads of matrices. For every snapshot or temporal snapshot, we had one matrix, and I was able to turn that into a simple graph which shows how the different dog brain regions connect to each other. And once we managed to cluster the nodes within that network, we were able to identify functional areas or functional regions of the brain, of the dog brain, which were actually very consistent with all the information they already had about the dog anatomy. So on the one hand, they had anatomy atlases, which were designed or created based on dissecting the dog's brain. So that was purely structural. And we were essentially be able to fill that structural layer up with the functionality thanks to the fMRI scans and network science. And I have another example which was supposed to be a bit shorter, but I think that I will mention it anyways. It's here and we are here. So This network is coming from the Barabashi lab. Albert Laszlo Barabashi is one of the founding figures of network science and also one of my former mentors and good friends. And about 10 years ago, even more than that, they published this so-called flavor network in which the nodes correspond to different food items. You can see there are things like black pepper, vanilla, garlic, egg, all sorts of meat, spices, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and they connected to food items if they were sharing food compounds, chemical compounds. Of course, the more similar two food items are, for example, different types of meats are much more similar to each other than different types of fruits, then they were connected, which resulted in these clusters. As you can see, this dark red, for example, in the center corresponds to different meat products. Sorry, that's the alcohols. In red here on the right, there are the meats. Then here comes the vegetables. Then here are in orange are the spices, in yellow the fruits. And while this is already like very interesting to just read and explore how the different types of food items connect to each other, this figure had two implications. One of them is still on the fun side. It turned out that Western cuisine, for example, I think they were using American cuisine as an example, tends to combine food compounds or food items which are very close to each other on this graph. Just think of any like meat product which is heavily salted and served with cheese. While it also turned out that Asian cuisine, I think that they were using Korean cuisine as an example, tends to combine food items from the opposite sides of this map. So if you think about something like sweet pork, then it already makes sense. But I'm pretty sure that the logic behind salted caramel, a personal favorite, is also very similar. And if I remember correctly, following this research, there were even some conferences, especially for chefs, where they were also using some parts of this network and this kind of research to kind of design new recipes and come up with new types of food. So that's one part. That's a very interesting and entertaining part. And the other part is the effect of the different food items we consume on our health. It turns out that there are already existing large databases which contain loads of information about the chemical composition of food items. For example, we have a long list of chemicals, thousands of chemicals that are present in, for instance, Apple. And there are other datasets which contain information about the possible health effects of those chemicals. So now, extending this network, we are able to connect food items we eat to chemicals to health effects, which means that if we map out an entire diet, so all the stuff we eat for example, for a week or a month or a year, then we can summarize the approximated overall health impact of the diet on our health. And that's all thanks to networks and knowledge graphs underneath. So by now we have seen networks from food to soccer, from biology to sports. And here the promo part.